to start with a complicated story. And it's a story from the Mishnah that's told about one of our sages, Akiba ben Mahalalel. When Akiba ben Mahalalel was in the older generations of rabbis alive, his younger colleagues turned to him and said, "We would like to make you the head of the rabbinic court. We would like to make you the Av Beit Din LeYisrael, the head of the court over all of our people of Israel, if only you will change your mind about 4 things. If only you will rule differently on 4 things you disagree with the rest of us on." But Akiba ben Mahalalel replied, "It is better that you call me a fool for my entire life than I do something evil for a moment before God." It is better that you call me a fool for my entire life than I do something evil for a moment before God. I will not turn my back on the law for power. Our parasha, Truma, is about the building of God's dwelling place. Just as our synagogue and our synagogue community is now being built up by your gifts, our parasha instructs Moses to go out to the people and ask them to contribute to the building of the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, the place that God will build and dwell therefrom, and therefrom speak to Moses. The Midrashim on this verse are interesting. They take God here to mean God's Torah, God's teaching, that God's teaching will come down and live with the Jewish people. And for some of the rabbis, this construction is problematic. You see, some of these rabbis found other rabbis stubborn, or found that there were those in their study halls who they disagreed with, both who loved Judaism, both felt they were speaking the words of the living God, and both couldn't agree what those words might be today. Or even maybe they struggled because it wasn't just the rabbis who would bring their gifts, it was everyone who brought gifts in. And so in one midrash, the rabbis ask, what is so important about the first verse of our parasha, Yichu li Truma, that everyone brought gifts? Because even the people that Moses hated brought gifts. Even those that would later rebel brought gifts. Because though God knew that people would turn aside from each other, they would disagree, they would digress, God chose to accept those gifts and come and dwell with the people of Israel. Our God is a God of which it also says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are both the words of the living God. Inside of disagreements are where God lives. In a book titled Justice and Judaism by Albert Vorspan and Eugene Littman, for which Rabbi Eisendrath, in his days working for the Union, wrote the foreword, it asks the question, isn't social justice controversial? The book answers, yes. And it continues. Some people challenge the idea that the synagogue should go beyond prayer and ritual and just a religious school. The Reform movement has overwhelmingly registered its disagreement to that viewpoint. Judaism divorced from life is an empty shell which must repel many intelligent, deeply committed religious Jews. Judaism divorced from life is an empty shell which repels many intelligent, deeply committed religious Jews. The URJ and the Religious Action Center have been taking the stand for many years now on issues from welcoming refugees, trans activism, justice reform, and gun laws. Many of these stances were stances which began in our youth movement, in NIFTY, where NIFTY would come and raise up to the Union for Reform Judaism. There are issues which we must discuss, issues which affect us, that we need Reform Judaism as well to stand for. On Thursday, our URJ camp, Camp Coleman, our sister camp to our Camp George, posted the following on its Facebook feed. It is with a heavy heart that we share with you the very sad news that our camper, Alyssa Al-Hadef, was the victim in the shooting in Parkland, Florida. On behalf of the entire Coleman community, we offer heartfelt condolences and prayers for comfort to Alyssa's family and friends. May Alyssa's memory forever be a blessing. Many of the students killed and the teachers killed in Parkland, Florida, were members of communities. In the Facebook group for our rabbinic colleagues, a few posted about the funerals that they had to conduct this week. And this generation in America is being called the school shooting generation. Some of you will remember when you had to practice for fallout drills and hide underneath your desks, which would, of course, shield you from all radiation. And our students now in the States, when they hear the words Code Red, know what that means and hope that the door to the classroom will protect them from incoming bullets. The students, unlike Columbine, are no longer in shock. It is no longer something which people look at and say, we didn't think this could happen. We didn't know. And now in the interviews, the students are speaking up, are tweeting back at politicians, are planning walkouts until legislation is passed and changes are made. The youth are beginning to lead. The next generation speak up about the future. For those that struggle to see this work as Jewish work, who struggle to see activism as core to Judaism, Borsban and Lippmann bring a challenging quotation by a non-Jewish theologian, an American, Reinhold Niebuhr, who says, "For every one individual that disavows religion because some ancient doctrine outrages his intelligence, hundreds become irreligious because the social impotence of religion outrages their conscience." I know that we have with us this morning many members of the generation who grew up in our synagogue, who grew up in NIFTY and in our family service, and who have a lot to say about social justice and the stances that our synagogue should be taking on these issues. And so to you, I plead and I ask and say, please share your voices in our community, and please ask us to take stands and be part of the work that you want to see happening in this world. These are the words of the living God. Back to Kivya ben Mahalalel. A complex story, a story which continues with a slip of the tongue, something which maybe when he was younger he wouldn't have said, but when he was older came out wrong. One of the four statements he held differently than the younger generation was that for him, a convert to Judaism wasn't the same as a Jew in every respect. But the rabbis responded, "We saw our great teachers, Shemaiah and Avtalion, treat a convert in exactly the same way as a Jew, in exactly the specific case that you're talking about." To which he replied, with a slip of his angry tongue, that if you saw Avtalion and Shammai do it, both themselves, Hillel and Shammai's predecessors, are spiritual teachers. If you saw them do it, it was clearly a simulation. It was clearly a fake. At which point, the rabbis excommunicated him and stoned his coffin after he died. But, they teach, on his deathbed, he turned to his son and said the following: "The four issues of Jewish law that I disagreed with my colleagues on, when you teach and when you rule, teach and make decisions the way that everyone else does." His son turned to him and said, "But didn't you care for them so much? Why are you telling me to do something different when you never withdrew from them?" To which he replied, "I heard those teachings from the mouth of the many, from a majority of teachers when I was alive, and my colleagues heard their teachings from a majority of their teachers. I stood fast by the traditions which I learned, and they stood fast by the traditions which they learned. But you have heard my tradition from only one mouth. The majority goes another way. You must leave the opinion of the one and rule with the many." There are many things going on in this story. There are thoughts of merit and pedigree, individual worth and prestige and how they pass through the generations. And here in our text is a written account of Jewish law changing, and Jewish law being set differently in different generations. Akiba ben Mahalalel is a leader and here a heretic. He is almost the Av Beit Din of all Yisrael, of all the people of Israel, and he is a rebel who is excommunicated, and even his coffin is stoned. He says that he cannot rule against the majority opinion that he grew up with, because he would be ruling against the words of God, only to tell his son to rule the opposite way, and if not, because he would be going against God's rule, the rule of the new majority. I have at least 3 books in my library that are tracts on social justice from the Union for Reform Judaism or the Union for American Hebrew Congregations, all of which discuss different issues and topics as the imperatives to which Judaism must speak. In 1941, the book speaks about laborers and orphans, about unionization and looking after the poor and the disenfranchised. In the 1960s, the books speak of civil rights and housing. And today, they speak of immigration, gender, justice, and guns. On these issues and more, our youth must lead. There's a social justice initiative being organized through the JCC for members of our youth movement and 20s and 30s groups, where the president of HAPSTI will be participating in a forum discussing how do our youth lead currently in our congregations and how could they be leaders in our city. And I ask those that have not yet shared their voices to please think of how they can be engaged and how our community can learn from you which way God's voice is calling. For those that say these issues and others don't belong in our schools and our synagogues, I thank you for your disagreement, because inside of our disagreement lies the living God, and our gifts, our terumah, is always in preparation for the next generation. Our controversies push to make the world safer, better, and more Jewish as we transmit Judaism into the future. So, argue with your children, thank them for their differences, and we all must learn from them. Shabbat Shalom.